Hello, everybody. This is episode 57 of the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. This is Jacob, and I am here with Decima this evening. Decima, good evening. How are things?
Hey, things are going really good. How are things going with you?
Been a bit busy this week, but busy's good.
Relatable.
When I'm not busy is when I get into trouble, so probably better to stay busy. This week, an interview with Daniel, and that's going to be a good one. But before we get to the interview, we're going to talk a little bit about the fear that you may have when getting ready to embark on quitting Kratom. I'll start with probably the first fear, and which was one that I always had, which was the fear of going through the detox and the withdrawals. Even though I ended up doing it probably at least 10 times, every time I was always fearful that it was going to be a bad experience or the worst experience ever. And usually it ended up being not as bad. You can psych yourself up pretty badly, and you can read a lot on the internet or talk to a lot of people, and you're gonna probably freak yourself out. I think it's very natural to do that. I certainly did it. Oftentimes, the actual experience can be not as bad. You never really know until you do it. So don't let the fear stop you from getting off of Kratom. It's just something that you have to go through, and it probably won't be as bad as you think it's going to be.
I can definitely relate there. Fear for sure can be debilitating. They don't say frozen with fear for no reason because it can literally freeze you in your tracks. The fear of withdrawal, not just going through the withdrawal, but how going through that withdrawal will interfere with your life and everything that you have going on. It's like, how am I going to balance all of this? It's one thing just dealing with the physical withdrawals, but then we sit there and we put so much on our plate at once. And it's just, I'm afraid of this and I'm afraid of this. And the next thing you know, you have a whole dish full of fears. I definitely understand how it can stop you from making that jump and moving forward in your recovery.
It can definitely do that, and it certainly did for me at one point in mine. I think the other fear, or some of the other fears that people have, is a lot of people do use Kratom for reasons like they think they're more productive, or they are maybe using it to help them get through something, and they're afraid that without that, they're not going to be able to be as productive, or maybe their performance at work or something will slip, or they'll experience some sort of effect that they had started taking Kratom for in the first place, like maybe anxiety or depression or something like that. Usually, if you've gotten to the point where you're listening to this podcast, then you probably know you have a problem with Kratom, and it's probably no longer serving you in any way, shape, or form. So any of those things I just mentioned, it may have helped in the beginning, but I can almost guarantee you that it's no longer helping, and that fear is pretty unfounded. I'll give you an example for the performance side. I had probably like one of the best years in my career when I was taking a lot of Kratom, coincidentally. Like the first year, and then the second year was a complete opposite. It was a disaster. And that's what can happen, right? You get to a point where it's hard to get out of bed, you're not thinking clearly, you're making bad decisions, and that's just what'll happen. And the same thing with, I was afraid that maybe I'd relapse on alcohol or do something else, because that's one of the reasons why I was using it. Also an unfounded fear. That's not to say it couldn't have happened, but you have to get over that and realize that's not you being rational, that's you continuing to most likely justify a reason to use something that was no longer serving you.
Absolutely. Making excuses for ourselves. We're definitely so good at that. And yeah, I want to touch on one thing you said. A lot of people were productive, quote unquote, whenever we are using Kratom. Some of us were not as productive as we thought we were, but some of us actually really did. For example, I did a whole bunch of things around my home. I built some things and started some projects and started projects like professional projects. I had all these things and I was worried about how I was going to maintain all of these things. I'm just going to say it. You're not. some things are going to have to go because we were taking on too much. We were doing more than what was sustainable. As much as I hate to admit it, the truth is that there was a time for over the last few months that my yard has looked like shit. Sometimes there's dishes in the sink, but guess what? My recovery is more important. And now I am actually able to maintain and sustain the things that I take on. I'm not having to pick and choose what's important. Like I can really be there and be present and really come through for the things that I commit to.
Yeah, that's a good point too about the taking too much on. There's this hustle culture that's out there that you have to do all these things and you have to be this certain way, and using substances to help you do that usually doesn't end well, regardless of what it is.
It always turns on us, always.
Yeah.
I think the main thing that we're both trying to get across, though, is that, yeah, there is going to be a little bit of a time period of adjustment for sure for most people. Hey, maybe you're a superhero and you can do it all anyway. Hey, kudos to you. But do not feel bad or beat yourself up if you feel like a lazy slob for a little while. That is okay because you're going to come back around. And I truly can tell you it's going to be so much better. And you're going to really be able to do it like in a natural, more, what am I trying to say? A natural energy.
Yeah, I agree. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself time to get back to baseline and figure out what you're actually going to be like now that you are substance free, and go from there. But don't feel like you have to maintain a crazy schedule if you don't. If there's things you can put off for a week, 2 weeks, that's totally fine.
Don't let fear stop you. I am afraid of your fear stopping you. That's what I have to say about fear.
Yeah, same. Look, just go on any of the websites or Reddit or Facebook or whatever group you're in, and look at how many people have done it. Thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands at this point. There's so many people that have quit this substance through every possible way you could probably think of. And if you talk to most of them, I bet they will tell you they were just as afraid as you are, and it probably was not as bad as they thought it was going to be.
Think about it. Every single time in your life that you've faced your fears, how did it work out? You're a superhero. Admit it.
And in the worst case, you learn something.
Yeah, maybe you flopped. Yeah, I've done that a few times too,
Yeah,
but it was okay.
sure. Yeah, it definitely was better than I thought it was going to be, for sure. I think with that, we'll get on to the interview with Daniel. Don't be afraid. Embrace it and just get through it.
Hey, you guys, I'm so excited to be here tonight. I was finally able to catch up with my friend Daniel so that we can chat for tonight's interview. How are you doing tonight, Daniel? I'm so glad we were finally able to make this happen.
I know, and I've been hard to get in touch with, so I do apologize for that. But I am doing great, Decima. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
Oh, good. It's been a crazy busy season for me, so
Yeah,
it's not all your fault. So thank you
yeah,
so much for working with me and all
of
your
course,
patience.
of course.
So like I said, I'm excited to chat with Daniel tonight. And the first thing that we always do, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and who you are, Daniel?
Yes, my name is Daniel, of course. I'm a 28-year-old dude who lives in Chicago. I love where I live. I'm a social worker. I was working in community case management, homelessness, and ironically enough, substance use disorders and how they co occur. Um, I will get more into that, but I've since actually changed career paths within my profession. I'm a major home audio, high end audio nerd, record collector, and I sell records as a side hustle at pop up events and online. And that's that's something that's kept me busy for many years. But that's pretty much it. I'm introverted. I have an amazing girlfriend who I live with, and I can't really, and an amazing cat. That's about all I can think of at the moment.
Definitely can't leave out our little pets for sure.
Yeah.
So, before we get started, let's just go ahead and let everybody know, are you still using Kratom? And if not, how long have you been off of Kratom?
First of all, I'll say no, I'm not using Kratom. And like, thank God. Just thank God. I never thought that I would be able to get off of it. I thought the rest of my life was going to look like me just taking this crap every day. And I'm just so lucky to be unshackled by it. The last date of use was January 4th, 2024.
98 days, a little bit more than 3 months. That is amazing.
It's
So,
a godsend. Yeah.
yes, I understand that for sure.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you.
How
Yeah.
did you learn about Kratom?
Yeah. So I was living in Indiana at the time where kratom cannabis is all illegal. In short, I was buying cannabis from this underground dispensary. It was like this whole referral system, and I was pretty in with all of that. Ironically enough, I was about 3 or 4 years sober from benzos and alcohol, but I was still smoking a bunch of cannabis, which is why I was in this dispensary. And one day, I went in to purchase some cannabis for myself and my girlfriend at the time, and they were selling kratom. And I had done some research about kratom in the past. I think the biggest barrier to me not taking it was the fact that it was illegal. And I also knew that if I did do it, it would likely become a problem based on the things that I had read. As much as I would like to deny that I really truly believe that I was aware that this would become a problem had I ever become introduced to it. So I actually didn't buy it. I walked out of the dispensary and then I went back immediately. I was like, actually, I do want to try some of that. So this was about like 2019, late 2019. I was almost 24 at the time. Um, and that's pretty much when it all started.
That is so interesting to me because a lot of people are caught off guard by kratom addiction and it takes them a little while to realize.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like you already knew that it was probably going to be, or was definitely maybe knew that it was going to be mind altering. And that was exactly why you did it. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, and no, for sure. And I think the more sober days I string along from Kratom, I'm able to like piece this together. The issue is that there is so much what I would call propaganda surrounding Kratom and the legality of it and this and that, that I was taking it and then I would stop for a couple of days and then I would take it again. And I wanted so bad to be taking it every day. And it was so easy for me to justify taking it every day when I like finally did, which didn't take long to do, by the way, because of all this misinformation surrounding kratom. It was so easy for me to go, okay, everyone on Reddit says it's totally safe and I won't experience any withdrawals. So I'm just going to start taking it all day, every day. Because that was my relationship with drugs. That has been my relationship with drugs. Even though I knew that this is going to be bad and I'm probably going to experience severe withdrawals from this when I do stop, the internet's telling me that it's totally fine and I'm going to listen to that because I am an addict. I
Of
will use
course.
any kind of anything to keep using. As much as I would like to say I didn't know, I think I knew, and I think it was really easy for me to just snowball this addiction based on all this crap that's out there surrounding this crap that is kratom.
Hey, no judgment from me. Just because it caught some of us off guard, that doesn't make us any different. I definitely have a history with drugs as well. So we'll get into that in just a moment. But I did want to ask, knowing that it was probably going to be addictive, did you know that it was an opioid
Um, I knew that,
or that it would behave as one?
yeah, I knew that's what it was before. I knew that it was similar to an opiate before like being introduced to it, like being given or having the opportunity to purchase it. Yeah, I knew that it had something to do with that. In short, yes.
I always wonder if I had known at that time if I would have taken Kratom or not. I'd like to think I wouldn't, but I probably would have too, just like you,
Yeah,
knowing full well.
and don't get me wrong, like it was still introduced to me as this safe alternative. And it's funny, there was
Right.
this YouTuber named like Psyched Substance or whatever. He like does like he does like drug he I don't know, he talks about like his experience using drugs, and he did make this content around the time that I started using it about how great it is. Okay, and then shortly after he made this video about how awful it is. And that's when I started really taking it, is when he came up with this video talking about just how awful it is and how terrible these withdrawals were. But I just didn't, I just chose to read what I wanted to read because I really liked the effects of it. It gave me energy. It made everything more manageable. And so I just clinged on to what I wanted to hear, essentially. But it was still talked about as this safe alternative.
Oh, how many of us went from advocate to warning. That's not the only time I've heard of this. There's another very popular YouTuber. I won't put anybody specifically on blast,
Yeah, maybe I
but
shouldn't have done that.
oh no, it's all good. His name rhymes with Moe, and he was huge in the procratum, and now
Um,
in I'm I want to say it's commendable, and I absolutely applaud that he's being honest and sharing his truth. But it just goes to
yeah,
show how many of us had to go through what we went through in order
yeah,
to change our tune a little bit there.
for sure. Yeah,
So that actually brings me to my next question. How long were you on Kratom?
yeah. So it was about a month after sparingly doing it where I was like, all right, like I'm doing this every day. And that's when it's hard for me to eat. It's just, it's been a blur. So, like I said, I started doing it in like December of 2019. And it was illegal in Indiana, but I found this way of getting it shipped to me in Indiana. And it was like, at the time, very potent and very cheap. And I had been using it. So I guess I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but I used it for since 2019 to early 2024, pretty much every day. I took 8 days off. I was able to get sober from it for 8 days in 2021, consecutive days. And then I just went right back into it because I said, oh, look, I just made it 8 days. When in reality, those getting off of it was so hard to do. The sleepless nights were horrible. The restless legs were horrible. But yeah, in short, without veering too far off, I used for about 5 years, pretty much every single day. And it was always powder. And like I said, I was getting a lot of it illegally for very cheap. So that just enabled me to do more and more. Yeah, we'll say 5 years, pretty much daily.
You're definitely not alone in the long-term use arena. I started back in 2015, and I also had quit for a little while as well. I quit for 2 years.
Nice.
And I hear it a lot, though, that relapse when it comes to Kratom,
Yeah,
it's so dang hard to beat.
yeah. And I think, again, I think that has a lot to do with just the propaganda surrounding it. I think it's really easy to dip back into it. Look, the internet still says that it's totally okay. That accompanied with it's like at every single like smoke shop ever. There's just not like all of this like media. There's no real stigma about it because no one even really, it's so benign. Really, alcohol, we hear about how alcohol causes DUIs and drunk driving deaths and cirrhosis of the liver, and people still drink. It's so that even that is so ingrained in our culture. So it's like with kratom, a lot of this media surrounding it really, I think, just enables people to go back into it. But then again, it's hard to stay sober from any substance. Working in recovery, relapse is just, It's common.
This is so true. It's very true. And accessibility and acceptability, social
Yeah,
acceptability. But I compare it to how an alcoholic must feel seeing alcohol everywhere and
yeah,
it's socially acceptable. So we do have that in common,
for sure.
unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a big thing that I struggled with too for 5 years was alcohol and benzos.
You actually had mentioned that earlier, and I wanted to circle back around and talk about that a little bit. Your history with drug use
Yeah.
and alcohol and such. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I learned very early on that drugs worked for me. I was a really anxious kid. I had extreme anxiety as a kid, crippling anxiety, beginning when I was in kindergarten, first grade. I was prescribed like Paxil as a kid, which is like an anti-anxiety. I was a problem kid. I was not. I was a good kid, but I was troubled, and I had extreme attention deficit disorder. So I'm in that cutoff generation of being prescribed like high doses of amphetamine in grade school. I think my first drug experiences were when I was in third grade. And I think that I was prescribed, I believe it was 10 or 15 milligrams of Focalin, which is essentially Adderall, XR, extended release. And I remember that kicking in every day and thinking to myself, this is what being high is. And at the time, I didn't like how the amphetamines made me feel. And I didn't until, frankly, recently, I rediscovered all that. But, anyways, I learned my anxiety still remained a big issue, like in high school. When I started dating, I really learned like that alcohol really works when I go and meet like my partner's mom and dad. Like a little bit of alcohol was always in my house, and I would steal it from like my dad. Um, and beginning like my junior year of high school, I started drinking every day before school, and that kind of went on into my senior year, give or take. And some days I didn't. And then it really got bad. I was drinking every day at the end of high school. And then I drank every day, all day, every day, summer going into college. And then I drank all day, every day as a freshman in college. I was going to a community college. And then I moved into a big university. So I turned 21 in the dorms. Uh, and then I was drinking all day, every day, my sophomore year of college. Around this time, I discovered benzos because benzos really helped with the morning tremors, like the hangovers. And I started taking 6 milligrams, 8 milligrams of Xanax a day, which is like 4 Xanax bars a day. Drinking on top of that, which is like so dangerous. Cocaine, just a poly addict, really. My junior year, I lost my best friend in this freak accident. And that's my mom also got diagnosed with cancer. She's okay now, but she got diagnosed with cancer within the same 2 weeks as my best friend passing away. And that's when I really went off the rails. And I stayed in school and all that, but I just really started using copious amounts. It was really, yeah, it was really extreme. And then I ran out of money and I stopped. I had to stop suddenly. And I remember I was going to get a photocopy of my driver's license and my social security card because I was about to start a new job. I had my first day of classes that day too. And I came to a couple of police officers and a couple paramedics, and I had had a seizure for 2 minutes. So then I just had to start back up again, really. Eventually, I did get off of the Xanax and the alcohol for good on June 6th of 2018. And I maintained like sobriety, but then I got really into like LSD and like smoking weed like daily, taking acid like way more than I would like to admit, like crazy amounts. And I think that really speaks to like they weren't the problem, they were the solution. And it was only a matter of time before I found a new solution. And then shortly after the weed and the acid, Kratom became the solution. And then I moved to Chicago and I kept up with the Kratom habit, and I started making a little bit of money for the first time in my life. And I started doing cocaine daily, weekly at least. And then I started getting really into these like street Adderall pills, which were probably, who knows what they were. But yeah, I've struggled with drugs and alcohol since for the last 10 years of my life. In my first experiences with drugs and alcohol were very young experiences. And I got drunk for the first time as a kid. I smoked pot all through middle school. I sold pot in middle school. Yeah, I didn't waste any time. I got right into drugs. And it's crazy. I knew as a kid that I was going to struggle with drugs. I don't know. It's so sad thinking about that now, but I remember learning like what a drug problem is and knowing that I don't know why, and I don't know if that's what led to me having a drug problem. I think I was genetically predisposed, and I knew that at a very early age. Um, but yeah, that's my drug history. I've done a lot of them, and I'm sober for the first time, like in a long time, um, as of now.
I am so glad that you're sober, and it's just I can't even tell you how much of that I relate to. Being introduced to drugs at a very young age it's something that you can't really understand unless you've been there. But I too am of the Prozac Paxil peoples.
Yeah,
I do remember getting high on these medications at a very young age as well. Thank you, just unlocked a core memory for me there.
well,
Hello.
I'm sorry about
But yeah, it's that shit's ingrained deep. We are predispositioned or predisposed to that.
that. I think
And
so.
I'm sorry to hear that you had to struggle, but I really hope that you don't have to struggle as long as I did because I think you're probably about half my age. So I'm
I just
so
turned 28, and yeah, and I'm so lucky that I'm
yes.
sober at this age. I realize that it's a blessing. It really is.
Absolutely. So hearing more about your story, it all makes sense to me that kratom would just be another substance for you to experiment with and eventually struggle with. Again, you already touched on this a little bit, but how did you know? Was there something that happened specifically? Were there like side effects that you were suffering? What kind of bad things started happening to you as a result of using kratom? And
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, why did you want to quit?
It's so. I think so many of us. I think all kratom users can say this. Like anyone who has a problem with it, the bad symptoms come about so quickly. Like the good symptoms go away, and then the bad symptoms arise in like fast. Gastrointestinal problems, the constipation, that started to really become a thing, and very early on. That's just something I dealt with for the last 4 years, and sex drive. Just I think it made me manic. I think it like made me like spend manically, and I think some of that was like just attributed to like how unhappy I was, and I would just spend money, buy these like quick fixes to like make me happy for the day. Not to mention the cost of kratom. So I would call that a bad side effect. I think it made my moods just out of control. It made my highs super crazy high. It made my lows so dangerously low. And we'll get more into that. It affected my work performance. Nobody at my job knew that I was high on kratom, literally always. But it definitely affected my productivity, and it affected the way that I allowed others to perceive me. Or it was this dirty little secret that I always had, like this thing that nobody can find out about. And I have kratom in my work bag, and my supervisor better not see me. I hope I don't get caught taking kratom capsules in the bathroom at work this afternoon. Or I'm getting a little off topic, but that
Oh
was
my
another.
God, no. Those bathroom doses were the worst.
Yeah, in the lethargy, like I would wake up in withdrawals around 4 in the morning. I would have to redose. It would take about an hour to kick in, and then I would knock out. But my work day at my last job began at 8 a.m. So if I'm falling back asleep at 5, I'm willing to sleep in now until 10, but my alarm's going off at 6, and I'm just so lethargic. And then from there, it's just maintenance all day. And then you can't, without sharing too much, you can't take a normal bowel movement. And it's been 5 days, and then you're drinking like 6 shots of espresso. I would literally make 6 shots of espresso. And while it's on my stovetop cooking, I would have a 10-minute alarm on my phone ready to wake me up when the espresso's done, like a Bialetti, like a stovetop espresso maker. So then I could go into my kitchen, turn off the burner, pour all of it into a cup, and then just put cold water in it and just drink all of it, all of it, right then and there. And then still go back into my bed and turn on like a 30-minute alarm. The the It made me so unmotivated and so tired. Meanwhile, all these toxins are just building up in my gut. It was so bad. The negative side effects were there were so many of them. It got so extreme. Dangerous levels of depression. And I'll get more into that, but just dangerously depressed and anxious.
It's like all of the reasons that we start taking kratom for, like for energy, social anxiety, things like that, the things that it supposedly helps with in the beginning, it completely turns on us and
Absolutely.
destroys those things later.
Absolutely. And then all of these things that we were like taking it for become, oh my gosh, levels of it that you never
Ugh.
thought even existed. And there was, yeah, and without overstepping, but there was, before I got checked into the hospital, there was a 3-day stint of, I didn't sleep for 3 days. I was just so anxious. I was just so anxious. I thought my whole world was about to, I thought my life was like the final Jenga piece that was about to just knock everything down. It got really delusional. But anyways, the anxiety that I had in those 3 days are levels of anxiety that I didn't even know existed. And it bothers me to know that anxiety on that level exists. And I'm not really a religious person, but I do now believe in like God in heaven, because I truly believe that I was experiencing Satan in hell, or some kind of evil entity in hell in those moments, in that 72 hours. And I attribute that to Kratom. I really do. It was that bad.
Daniel, I appreciate you being vulnerable with us today. And I actually think that this would be a good time for us to segue into something a little more serious. And this is going to come with a trigger warning. If you would like to go ahead and edit this for yourself at this time, listeners, this would be the time. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the darker experiences that you had with Kratom and some of the stuff that you were sharing with me that you would like to share with the listeners, Daniel. Would you like to
Yeah.
talk?
Oh, yeah. And I think it's like super important. I really do. But I guess I'll just lead with, I was working as a community case manager. I was managing a team of people who worked in the community. We had like 60 client caseload. There were not many of us doing like really hard work. And I think that I was doing that for 2.5 years. And I was taking Kratom during all of it. And I think that it got to this point where I just started to like really lose control. We ran into some serious staffing problems. My supervisor left, and then my program manager left, and then my director left. So I was stuck with what I felt like the weight of the world. The months leading up to this, things got really out of control with my kratom usage and my anxiety. And I didn't have any kind of positive coping skills. For a little bit there, I was like, Like what I was doing to like self-soothe and like self-care was like going and getting, and this is going to sound crazy, but going and getting tattooed like every weekend. I started to like really run out of what it looks like to live a healthy life because it had just been so long since I had lived like a healthy lifestyle. The idea of waking up in the morning and like going for a walk, even though I live like on the beach in the city, like that just sounded like such a chore. Unless it was like this extreme thing that was gonna snap me out of like how depressed and frankly suicidal I wasn't going to do it. I would go to the record store and spend money that I didn't have, but it was just exciting and like dopamine producing. So after the new year is when things got really heavy at my job, and just I frankly I snapped. I just lost control. And then I had like a 24-hour panic, and then that turned into a 48-hour panic. And that's when by day 3, I really genuinely thought that my girlfriend was getting ready to pack up and move out. And it was just the combination of so many things. And a lot of it was just totally irrational and disoriented and just maybe even like manic. Even though I've not been diagnosed with mania, it was almost like a psychotic break. And so yeah, by day 3, work started to get I started getting calls coming in like, this client is at the office, they're being evicted, the landlord wants money, or this client 50 miles away, or no, like 20 miles away is like being hospitalized, or all this stuff. And so many people were just like coming to me with all these things. And I just, I got to this point where I was like, I literally just, I have to end my life. I'm never going to be able to be sober. My life is just spiraling out of control. And keep in mind, like, I was 3 days without sleep at this point. But that's when I attempted to end my life. And I tried for a long time. And it, like, yeah. And it turned into, I guess I can't do this. It, like, proved to be more difficult than I thought. And that's when I went to the agency that I was working at the time, and I pulled the nurse aside who worked on my team, and I was like, like, I can't do, I need serious help right now. I'm having a mental health crisis, and this is what's going on. And I know this is going to burden our team so much, but I need to go to the hospital. And she was nice enough to come back to my apartment, my flat, with me and help me like call an ambulance. And that was the beginning of the whole journey of where I'm at now.
So grateful for that nurse and that you had somebody that you felt that you could talk to, because if it wasn't for having somebody to talk to, who knows?
Right. No,
Um,
right.
I,
Right.
I'm so glad, and a lot of people can relate to the hopelessness. So we really appreciate you sharing that. And how now you said that started your journey. Didn't you say that you were then in a facility from that point? And then is
Yeah.
that how you started on your journey with healing and quitting Kratom? Is that how all of that began?
I wish that I could say that. I wish that I could tell you that from there I was sent to a supervised detox, and then after that I was then welcomed to a 30-day inpatient treatment program. I wish that were the story, but instead what happened was I was sent to a hospital that did not have a detox program. Since I had attempted to end my life, I was put on a psychiatric floor. So I spent 24 hours in full blown withdrawals, which turned into 48 hours of full blown withdrawals in this psychiatric. They moved me to a different room at one point, but I was in so much pain. The withdrawals, they gave me like a little bit of Ativan, like once or twice. But other than that, I was literally throwing my body against the wall in this room, because they just were not. They were treating my mental illness, like,
Right.
of the moment. They weren't treating the substance use. So then what happened was they didn't check my insurance or whatever. I don't know. And I was then sent to, after about 48 hours, I was then sent to a state run, like a psychiatric ward, essentially. It was basically a jail with, it was a free for all with 3 meals a day. And there were people in this facility who were cutting themselves open with sharp objects and just terribly. My roommate would threaten to kill me in the middle of the night, and it was a very traumatic experience. And what was really hard about it was I got in on a weekend, and the weekends don't count as days. And since I was in there for having like a long history of a drug long drug history, and given the circumstances of me trying to end my life, really, I was in this facility for as long as I really lost my rights at this point to leave. So it was really hard. It was really traumatic because I didn't know when they would let me out. So my family, and just, I'm just so thankful for them. It was really hard for my family to know that I was in this place, and they really fought, like, to get me out of this place. And I'm really lucky that I only spent 7 days in there. It was really hard. The state, it's a very sensitive thing. The state does not want to release somebody who has attempted to end their life. It's a large liability, which I didn't know that then. I didn't know that when I caused this giant scene, as I view it. But I got out in record time under one condition, and that was that I would be wheeled to what they call a door-to-door transfer from where I was at this state facility to the substance use treatment center.
Experience sounds absolutely terrifying
It was a
and
lot.
traumatic. It really does.
Yeah.
I definitely feel you there. Please tell me that something good came from this.
Yeah. A big reason why I wanted to come on to this podcast, I guess the first thing being, it was always, listening to this podcast was always really motivating for me. Like, one day maybe I'll be able to get sober and come on this thing. That was a pipe dream because I really didn't think that I ever could come off of this stuff. And that's what led me to, a big part of what led me to the action that the wild action that I took to end things. And I really wanted to come on here and share that there's always time. You can always get help. It never needs to get to that point. And if you need help, you are allowed, and you owe it to yourself to just ask for it. This is a serious substance. I don't care what people say about it on the internet. It really led to a very extreme thing for me. And this is not something to be taken lightly. And if you need help from it, I you got it. I think you just totally owe it to yourself to ask for it. This isn't the end of the whole story of it. There's more to it that I'll get into, but yeah, that's without overstepping what your questions.
So let's talk about that then. How did you quit? It sounds like you had good support, which is
Yeah.
big. That's really big. How did you decide to quit, and
Yeah.
how
So
did you do?
I got admitted that day, and that was the beginning of the where I'm at today. That's where I really learned how to how to live a sober life, essentially. That's where I really learned the skills to that I've needed for a long time, frankly.
Would you say where your recovery began, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. And I met so many people that had similar stories to mine, and it was the best 28 days of my life. And I made relationships with people. I learned so much about so much. And it was really inspiring for me to be around like young licensed social workers, because that's what I am. And just see that like there are other there's other work out there that I can take. My life doesn't have to be this terrible dead end. It was just a really meaningful. It was just the best 28 days of my life. I had so much fun there.
So what was okay, let me ask you this. Whenever you got did you have to like go through withdrawal from Kratom, and were
Yeah,
you only withdrawing from Kratom or were you withdrawing from other substances? What was that withdrawal like?
it was just kratom, and I had been sober now at this point, like the day of my admission, for it would have been about only I would have only been on day like 8. So I was still very sick. And I got really sick when I was there. Like everyone there says that it was just an opiate withdrawal, but I think that it might have even been like something else that I had picked up at like this kind of wild and crazy, again, I don't want to offend anyone, but this kind of like jail psych ward. I think that it could have been something that, I don't know, the lack of sleep. But yeah, I was really going through it. Um,
Yeah.
for the next, I would say, 8 days, 9 days. And yeah, you got to remember, I didn't have a supervised detox. So and I would make jokes in treatment like I'm just surrounded by a bunch of spoiled brats. If you only knew, but I was just joking, of course. If you only knew where I came from. And like everyone at treatment said that when I got there, I was just like a frazzled mess.
It sounds to me like you had to deal with the detox part of it and the withdrawals pretty much on your own. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I did. I did. Yeah, there was no. Yeah, that is fair to say, but it is not unfair that I don't feel shafted by it by any means. I wish it could have occurred a little differently, but the fact that I am sober today means I get a pretty big kick out of it. I really didn't think that it would be possible. I did not see that for myself.
Absolutely. I'm so happy for you too. I guess I'm just trying to see if there was anything that you did to bring yourself comfort, or did you just white knuckle it and say, "What? This experience is what it is, and I'm going to remember it and never go back there." I
So
mean,
yeah, no, I'll say this treatment center didn't have a detox unit. So by the time in this, you were admitted to this facility, you were deemed like detoxed, end quote. So there were people who were coming in who were still pretty like shaky hands. Like my buddy, who he's my buddy now, really great dude. He was just over the other day actually. He's also rocking this. He came in a couple of days after me. And his deal was alcohol, and he was still like shaky handed, all of that. So I wasn't the only one amongst my peers there who were still going through it. But I knew that they were giving me like gabapentin, they were giving me like hydroxyzine, trazodone to help me sleep, just the classic rehab meds. And every day it got easier, and every day it continues to get easier. So
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, a lot of people say that experience of just having to go through it is something they take with them as a reminder to never go back. So, it
yeah.
whatever it takes is what I always say. How is your life today, kratom free? What's that look like?
It's insane how different it is. Like it is actually insane. I finished up my treatment at Foglia. That was the name of the treatment center, and I wasn't planning to name drop them, but I think that they're such a good center in Illinois. They do accept scholarships. It's in Elk Grove Village. It's called Foglia Treatment Center. They really what they did there was amazing. And then after that, I segued into a 3-day-a-week IOP program. And I had time to do that. I had time to really work post recovery, which was a really big concern for like my family and myself and like my girlfriend. And I was on like a family medical leave. And so I'm very lucky in that I was able to like really just make recovery like the central focus of my life. I made sure I had a sponsor by the time I got out. I went to AA meetings every day. I tried to pretty much every day in treatment. And yeah, like I said, I made sure I like got linked up with a sponsor before I was discharged. I started going to meetings, still doing meetings. I finished my IOP program. I decided not to return to my job. And it was a hard decision for me because I am very passionate about homelessness and long-term housing, and that being a big barrier to abstinence from illicit drugs in just that kind of advocacy work. But I'm in too fragile of a position to be doing that kind of work right now. So I really decided like what because it's non-negotiable. I need to be helping people always. That's why I chose social work. That's why I got a master's degree in it. I just can't. I want to be doing meaningful work like that. So I really went back to the drawing board and I said, what is it that I want to be doing with this? And I remembered as an intern in graduate school, I worked in end of life care, which was totally a random placement by the university. I never would have wanted to actually do that, but I learned to really love that work, hospice care, and the fact that it's just you're really making an impact on families' lives as a whole. And so I started looking for jobs in that subgenre of social work, and I ended up recently taking on a new job, starting a new job. It's like my third week now. I'm really impressed with this company. I'm doing home hospice work. It's calm. It's There's a work-life balance. I'm selling more records. Um, I started doing pop-up shows, so like record fairs and stuff like that. Something I've always wanted to do. Um, I have a beautiful relationship with my girlfriend. We get out and like actually do things now. It's amazing. I The difference in my life is night and day. I actually have a relationship with my mom and dad now. There's no like resentment towards anyone, or at least I'm really working on that. I don't want to put energy into like being an angry, mean, this is how the world has wronged me kind of person. It's just even like driving, I don't get like road rage. Like I used to be so crazy and out of control. It's unbelievable the difference. The way my life looks now, uh, and it hasn't even really been that long. But the amount of things that I've accomplished in the last 98 days is mind-boggling. I never, I, I don't have like financial problems anymore. I am 100% out of debt. Just so many things in my life. I'm working on getting my clinical license in social work, which was something that I was so afraid of pursuing. The fear of failing the exam, the state exam. I'm actually like studying. I'm really like living life now. And I'm so lucky to still have, like, in treatment, I felt like a pretty spoiled. Like, a lot of people were in treatment because they had lost everything for a lot of things. And I was in treatment to keep the things that I had in a way. And I'm so lucky that I'm so blessed that I am able to still have the things that I do. I'm really lucky that my girlfriend has stuck by me over the years. I don't know why she has, but she has. And I'm just so lucky that I have so many people who believe in me. And my life is it's night and day. It's night and day.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that you're able to put your recovery and your mental health first. I bet you feel like a whole new person, don't you?
I I really do. Yeah, I really do.
I
It's
can
it's
totally relate. I always say I feel like the person I like myself, like who I'm supposed to be.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Daniel, what would be your number one tip for somebody if you were to give somebody advice that's asking for help to quit?
To quit, I would say don't be afraid to do whatever makes sense for you to get off of this. I know that there's controversy with the Suboxone route, and my only my only fear with that whole thing is just, are you going to be able to get off the Suboxone? Are you just monkey swing into another potentially very addictive thing? I just, whatever works though. Like whatever you need to do, whatever job you need to quit, whatever. And I guess I feel bad even. I don't know. Just whatever changes you need to make in your life to get sober, make the changes. And when you're sober, things organically come together. I know that's easy for me to say though, and I feel like a brat saying that. Oh, just quit your job if you have 4 kids at home and you're taking this stuff like just to hold on. I really do believe though that just surrendering. People have always said this to me in the past. Once I just surrendered to the fact that I had no control over this and I just needed serious help is when I really saw a change. And I really contested that. I guess what I'm trying to say is whatever you need to do, just whatever it is you need to do to get off of it. People might think that the fact that I went to a 28-day inpatient program for Kratom is completely outlandish and totally overkill, and that's fine. You may think that. That's what I needed to do. For that, there's no way that I would be sober today had I not done that. People will say that it's crazy that I was throwing my body against a wall in the floor of the hospital from kratom withdrawals, and that's fine. You may think that's how my body reacted to it, and what I needed was to go to treatment. So it's whatever you need to do, really. If you can't afford treatment, you can go to check yourself into a detox and you can get a scholarship to go to treatment. I just mentioned one that accepts scholarships. A lot do. If you just, yeah, I can't reiterate it enough. Whatever you got to do it because it's just so worth it.
Absolutely. I always say we do whatever it takes and we also mind our own recovery. So we're not
Yeah,
judging each other on how we get there. But
right.
Daniel, I just wanted to let you know that I related to so much of your story tonight. Everything from the health issues, having to wake up early to dose in the morning, already in withdrawal,
Uh-huh.
obsessive tattooing, relationship issues, taking kratom as a dirty little secret. Let's see, compulsive shopping. I'm still paying for that.
Uh,
All the way down to being committed to and locked away in multiple facilities. I just really related
Damn.
so
Good.
much. So I appreciate it. And I know that I'm not going to be the only one. Is there anything else that didn't ask you or that we left out that you want to make sure to talk about tonight?
I really don't think so. And I guess I am feeling a little bad. I feel like I did most of the talking here. I feel like I said a lot.
We're
I feel
here to hear your story, Daniel.
I do talk a lot. I got a lot to say, but I think I said it all tonight. Yeah, this is about other people. I really, it hurts my heart to know that people are still out there struggling with this thing that I was for such a long time. It was really bad, and there is hope though that you really there is you can get sober from this stuff. You really can. Your life does not need to look like this forever. It's just the reality.
I know that's right. Absolutely. 100% agree. Life is so much better on this side. Daniel, thank you again for
Thank you, definitely,
sharing your story with us. I
of course.
super enjoyed our interview, and then we'll just go ahead and get on to the rest of the show.
Welcome to Kratom in the Headlines, also known as Charlie ranting about the Kratom marketplace. Recently, there was this live event on Facebook sponsored by the Kratom industry that made the case that Kratom is a pathway for recovery and a tool for sobriety, and plant-based recovery tools should not be demonized, and most of the information about the negatives of Kratom is false, is misleading, is exaggerated, and that overall Kratom is mostly a good thing. And one of the first comments was somebody was like, I'm currently working with 2 people through the steps to get over a Kratom addiction, the 2 people I'm sponsoring. And the presenter who runs a recovery center said, well, it's known to happen. And, I just think that's an example of how it's minimized. And the speaker gave an example of like somebody that was drinking a couple of fifths a day, and now he does 2 grams in the morning, 2 grams in the midday, and 2 grams in the evening of Kratom, and hasn't drunk for years. And I'm sure that is true. I know there are some people like that, but there's many people who the 2 grams 3 times a day stops working. It becomes ineffective. They either just get a tolerance to it, or they start having side effects. So they have to take more, and it's not a long-term solution. And I've heard people, the Kratom like made them stop wanting to drink, but when they went off the Kratom, then they returned to drinking, and the long-term Kratom use was unsustainable. So I do think that the industry, when they sponsor events like this and they try to put a pretty face to Kratom, they have commercial interests that are overriding. They want this feel-good story. Anybody that sells a product, they want all 5-star reviews on their products. And the fact is, many of us, the guests of this podcast, and many of our listeners, we give Kratom a 1 star. Sorry, that's the voice of the commercial marketplace. Here's the audio from the guest commentary.
We'll be discussing the logical fallacies present in John Shinholzer's and Mac Hadow's discussion on Kratom that was given on April 11th, titled Kratom Education, Underage Prevention, and Misuse Discussion. We'll take a look and break down some of the logic and the topics they discuss. Let's start with John Shinholzer. While his personal stories about Kratom may be compelling, they fall into the trap of relying on anecdotal evidence. Anecdotes, while emotionally powerful, do not replace rigorous scientific evidence when it comes to evaluating the effectiveness of a substance. Shinholzer also frequently appeals to his own authority and experience in the field of recovery. While his credentials are impressive, they should not be used as the sole basis for substantiating claims about Kratom. Another issue in Shinholzer's argument is the presence of false dichotomy. He presents Kratom and traditional recovery methods as the only options, ignoring the existence of other treatment modalities. Throughout his narrative, Shinholzer uses emotional appeals, particularly when discussing the potential life-saving aspects of Kratom. While these appeals are powerful, they can overshadow a balanced discussion on the risks and benefits based on systematic evidence. Lastly, Shinholzer sometimes employs strawman arguments by misrepresenting opposing views to make them easier to counter. This oversimplifies the concerns about Kratom's safety and efficacy. Now, let's move on to Mac Hadow. Like Shinholzer, Hadow relies heavily on anecdotal evidence and personal testimonies to argue for the benefits of Kratom. While these stories are compelling and they're emotionally impactful, they cannot replace comprehensive scientific studies. Hadow also uses emotional appeals, aiming to evoke empathy and support from the audience. However, this approach can overshadow a balanced analysis of the issue. Throughout his discussion, Hadow sets up and knocks down simplified versions of opposing arguments, particularly when challenging the FDA's credibility. This straw man tactic suggests that any opposition to Kratom is based on flawed or dishonest motives rather than legitimate concerns. Hadow also engages in ad hominem attacks by questioning the motives and integrity of the FDA and other regulatory bodies. This shifts the focus from the substance of the regulatory concerns to the character of the regulators. Another fallacy present in Haddow's argument is the black or white fallacy. He presents the situation as a choice being between kratom as a life-saving option or being against saving lives. This dichotomy ignores the complexity of drug regulation and the possibility of a nuanced approach. Lastly, Haddow appeals to authority by referencing his own experience, connections, and past roles to bolster his claims. While his insider knowledge may be valuable, it should not be the sole basis for accepting his arguments about kratom. In conclusion, both John Shinholzer and Mac Haddow's discussion on kratom contains several logical fallacies and persuasive tactics that can lead audiences to overlook the need for rigorous scientific evaluation and balanced regulatory approaches. While their arguments may be emotionally compelling and effective in rallying support, it's important to recognize these fallacies and approach the topic of kratom with a critical eye, seeking out comprehensive and unbiased information. Thank you for tuning into our short little podcast segment.
And until next week, keep it kratom free.
H2O check. Decima here with this week's resource of the week. And it's all about that magical life force that every living thing needs to exist on this planet, water. Yeah, we have all heard about how important it is to drink our water, but are you truly making your water intake a priority and taking it seriously? Or are you waiting until you're thirsty to drink water? Are you drinking something else when you're thirsty instead of water? Hint, thirst is the first sign that you are dehydrating. So if you're thirsty, you already have some catching up to do. I once read that the very first thing that you should put into your body in the morning is water. That stuck with me because it just made so much sense. Then I learned all about the science behind water and how water is the medium in which all nature is governed and information is exchanged. Every living thing is made of water. Water is the only substance on earth that can exist in 3 states. Water stores and exchanges information. Any substance that touches water leaves traces of itself in that water. There have been studies that have found that the bodies of waters on war-torn lands have been affected by the trauma of that destruction. I get it. This is all some fancy dancy, hippy dippy stuff to some of you, but let me throw some facts at you. Up to 60% of the adult human body is made of water. The brain and heart are composed of 73% water. The lungs are 83%. The skin is 64%. Muscles and kidneys are 79%. And even the bones are 31% water. We are literally made of this stuff. In fact, here are the top 10 healthy benefits of water: hydration, improved digestion, weight management, detoxification, radiant skin. Love that one. Big one for me. Number 6 is energy boost, cognitive clarity, muscle function, joint health, and even mood enhancement. Imagine all of that from a substance that we can literally get for free straight from the garden hose if you're a Generation Xer like me. So, just to make sure that we're getting enough water, one rule of thumb to determine your baseline intake amount is to calculate your weight times 0.5. That's going to equal the number of ounces that you should be drinking daily. Adjust the number, of course. If you're exercising, you're going to want to drink more. You really should be peeing every few hours. And if that pee isn't clear, drink more water. Another tip is that it's easier to chug water if it's room temp. And there's even some research to suggest that it's less constricting on your blood vessels and aids in digestion. For me, it's also easier on my sensitive teeth if I drink water at room temperature. However it is you prefer to drink your water, even if it's from one of those obnoxious Stanley cups that's the size of a Volvo, let's make sure we are getting our fill of this healing life force. Remember, teeny tiny baby seedling plant shoots can burst through concrete because of the power of water. And isn't that what we are, after all? New life bursting through concrete. And with that, I raise my obnoxiously large 72-ounce favorite juggie and I say cheers.